Good afternoon, everybody. I keep saying this every time. I have no idea what day it is, but I know it's the afternoon because the sun's coming through the windows on that side over there. Today we've got Emma OBrien, who's going to be taking us through some of her amazing pictures, pets, etc., and a bit of business stuff. So I'm certainly looking forward to the presentation. There's one pick in there which I think all of you guys will be a little bit amazed by and wondering why. Was it one shot, two shots? It's certainly a standout one for me. So Emma, it's great to have you on here. Your pictures are fantastic. I think you've got some great business bits and pieces that you're going to pass on to us. So yeah, over to you.
Thanks very much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Right, shall I start the slideshow?
Yeah.
We're winning now. Okay, good.
Yay!
Yay! Finally, she gets the tech right. So hi, everybody. Thanks, Quentin, for having me and inviting me to be here. It's lovely to be sharing some time with you all. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Emma OBrien. I have been a professional photographer for the last 16 years, and I'm also a business mentor to other photographers and creatives as well. I'm a Nikon South Africa school trainer. Quentin and I have just been talking about Canin, so that's quite funny. I'm also a TEDx speaker, and I share my home with 6 dogs and a parrot called Richard. So I've been in South Africa for 10.5 years now, and I come from the UK originally. And I started my career off as a wedding photographer, but what was always a passion for me and kind of what I wanted to do really as a photographer was to be a documentary photographer. But sort of life got in the way, and I started a business shooting weddings. And shooting weddings in the UK was sort of a bit of an interesting experience because you're up against difficult weather a lot of the time. And then I got divorced, which sort of really killed wedding photography for me. So when I moved to South Africa in 2009, I retired immediately from weddings, and I concentrated on shooting portraits. And in 2011, I very accidentally became a dog photographer, which I'll share a little bit more about how I got there. So the one thing I will share with that is I think there is, it's really important to specialize in some sort of photography, and that won't always happen at the very start of a career. We tend to shoot anything and everything when we start out as photographers, but I think if you want to be really successful and you want to be kind of top of your game as a photographer, there is real benefits in specializing. So like I say, quite accidentally ended up specializing in dog photography. So for the next hour, I'm going to take you through a magical mystery tour of some of my work. So if you've got any questions that come up as we're going, fire them off to Quentin and he can share them, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. So some of you might have seen this image before. It's quite an old one of mine. And like I said, when I moved to South Africa, I really had the opportunity to kind of reconnect with my love of and passion for documentary photography. And I think the one thing that I love about this sort of photography is the ability to tell stories through images. And one of the photographers that I've kind of very heavily influenced by was a guy called W. Eugene Smith. And he shot images for Life magazine in the 50s and 60s, I think. So he's a bit of an obscure photographer. So if you Google him, you'll find more of his work. And what appealed to me about his work was the fact he was shooting images and series of images that were bringing to the fore stories that people wouldn't ordinarily know about, and telling stories that were really important that would perhaps have been sort of overlooked if he hadn't have taken the time to go out and share that work. So that was a kind of really what I wanted to be doing with my work. It was about making work with meaning for me. And like I said, the dogs arrived very accidentally for me. In 2011, I went to Sandton SPCA and I went and adopted a little sausage dog called Jeremy. And whilst I was there, I got chatting to them and I said, listen, I'm a photographer. How can I help you with fundraising? Can I do something to work? Can we work together somehow? And we started shooting this annual calendar. So we shot, the first one went out in 2012. It's still going. This year's is going to be a little bit more challenging because we can't shoot new work, but at the moment. And this is a project that's raised like over R1 million to date. So it's been a really impactful project. And from Sandton SPCA, I ended up getting involved with a charity called CLAW, which is community-led animal welfare, and they're out in Rudaport. And they often do outreach work in the local communities. You've got people who have animals, and as you can see from this gentleman in the picture, they love their animals very much, but they don't necessarily have the financial means to care for them. So that's what CLAW does. They provide that service to the community. And I think for me, as a dog owner and someone who's, dogs are my favorite. You kind of see that the bond you have with a dog doesn't matter how, what you have materially. We all love our dogs the same. And I think for me, that's why I'm so passionate about that charity.
I love the sort of feeling that you can get from this picture with the two dogs just besotted with the owner.
Yeah. No, it was lovely. So this shot was I kind of was trotting around. This is a very small informal settlement, and word gets out very quickly that there's a mobile clinic on site, and people all kind of, I don't know, just like Chinese whispers. So all of these dogs start arriving, and I'd just been having a little bit of a scoot round, and I spotted this guy coming down the hill to my right, walking towards me with his dogs. And obviously he'd got home from wherever he was working, and it was time to go out for a walk. And I shot some pictures as he was walking towards me, but it was this shot as he was walking away that just it was just so powerful for me, because it's just, you see his arm around him and they're just so thrilled to be spending time together. It's just wonderful. So it's kind of, this has been the ethos of my personal work, certainly, of kind of really telling stories with a bit of meaning to them. So I've put quite a few black dogs in this presentation, because the one question I get asked more often than anything else is, how do you photograph black dogs? So I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a rundown with this. Primarily, the most important thing with black dogs is to shoot with some light on them. You're not going to be able to backlight them. You need to light them quite directly. So this was shot just before, sort of at sunrise. I've got a friend who's got a whole bunch of these beautiful Belgian shepherds. So we went out very early one morning, and obviously I'm shooting with the sun was coming up behind me. So I got this shot before it was kind of very bright. And it's just this beautiful, diffused, soft light, and you pick up all these lovely the grass was really wet, so we had we're all soaked up to our knees, with all the juice. So it's just this kind of lovely soft lighting, and you get all the details of the coat and the water on the coat and the eyes. So it's about lighting on the dog for black dogs. This was shot at about 800 ISO. I think we shouldn't be too worried about shooting at higher ISO settings. Often you'll have people who are a bit afraid to push it. I mean, 800 is not very high in the general gist of things, but people get afraid to push ISO up too high because they're worried about noise and grain. And from my general experience with it is that if you expose pretty much correctly in camera, you don't have too much of an issue with that noise in your images. It's just when you start to try and pull, really rescue images that are horribly underexposed, that you start to get that noise in the dark areas there. So, and this was shot at quite a wide aperture as well, so I could keep my shutter speed in my low light conditions here sharp enough to avoid any movement with the dogs. That's the one thing with dogs and kids, is you've got the potential for a bit of movement in a shot, so which we don't want.
I got a comment here from Deona McLeod, I think it is. Emma, what you do is exactly what I dream of doing and specializing in. Been so keen for this presentation. Oh,
great. Thank you. I'm glad. Hopefully I can share some more pearls of wisdom as we go through. So just a little bit of a note on lighting. early morning and late afternoon lighting, if you're shooting outdoors, is always a win, but it's not always possible. So there are quite a few images in here that were shot whenever I was out shooting. So I'll kind of share that with you. You know, everything's not always completely ideal, and sometimes we just have to crack on and shoot regardless. So you might recognize this gentleman. This is Roger Good. This was shot for Pet Prints magazine. So I've been shooting their covers and their celebrity features in their magazine since 2017. He is, oh, there we go, I've got dogs barking. He is right on cue. He is as crazy in real life as he is on the radio. It was difficult to get him and the dogs to stay still during this shoot. So technically speaking, this was just shot. There was a window to the left, so it was just natural light in a bedroom here. And I just think this is just this moment. The dogs were looking at him like, what is going on here? Why are we all on the bed? And it was just a really lovely, fun shoot. And the one thing you'll see as we go through the presentation with a lot of the pictures I take, my work's very much about kind of the character and the energy in the images. I don't shoot the most polished photography, and I think actually that's okay. You know, some people have a real kind of skill at being brilliant technically. I try and keep everything set up wise as simple as possible, and just really focus on what's happening in the images. So.
I think what's pretty cool about that is that, you know, you then, in my opinion, you start getting more of the emotional side of things and the moments as they happen, as opposed to, well, hold on, we need to just change that a bit, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's pros and cons, I suppose, depending on what you want.
Absolutely. There's a time and a place for super tech stuff where your lighting has to be really, really precise. And I think it depends on your style of photography and, like you say, what you want to get out of the work you're making. So I think it's just to know that everybody has their own individual style, and you don't have to shoot like somebody else to be a good photographer. So lots of ways of doing things. I've put a little note here about magazine photography. So I shoot quite a lot of magazine stuff for Pet Prints. I often do the covers for Canine Zone. Any aspiring magazine photographers, doesn't pay very well, folks.
Yep.
They don't think you can be a magazine photographer and buy a Porsche. Unlikely. The value of magazine work is the fact that it gives you interesting coverage for your work, and B, I think what's really great about it is from a client perspective. If a client has seen that you've made work that's been published, it kind of raises your value in their eyes. So that is where you get the value from magazine work. You're unlikely to get any extra work commissions from a tiny little credit in a magazine. People very rarely stop to look at who shot an image. It's just the fact that it's great for portfolio stuff, and it's great for building credibility. So here's another one for Pet Prints. This is Jeremy Loops. Just dropped a couple of celebs in here for you. This is all the celebs now.
Yeah, I didn't notice the name dropping at all.
But that's the great thing about the magazine work, is that I've been able to work with some cool celebrities. So that's the other thing with it, is you get to shoot interesting works that you might not ordinarily have done. So I think the other theme we talked about, capturing emotion in images, is very much getting the bond between people and their animals. I will have instructed him to look at the dog here. But you kind of, as a photographer, when you're getting this sort of shot, you have to take a little bit of time, I think, to stop and almost be an observer before you take the image. Henri Cartier-Bresson, who's one of my other favorite photographers, I like these really old school photographers, talked about the decisive moment in photography. Which, from my interpretation of it, is just really choosing very carefully to, when you press the shutter, and just getting it at the right time. It's like the picture of the man and his dogs, a split second before or after, and it just wouldn't have worked. So it's very easy when we're shooting to be in a rush and to, you know, kind of snap, and feel like you've got to constantly be on the go. And sometimes it's good to take a moment to just reflect, and sometimes allow things to unfold a little bit in front of the lens. And that's often when you get some really, really beautiful shots. It's just when moments occur.
It's quite
So
interesting how across the different genres that we've had on so far, there's a couple of threads that go throughout all of them, and you can apply the same waiting for that moment to weddings, to
yep,
family shoots, etc. So
yep,
whatever genre that you is the one that you prefer.
yep,
The rules really are still there. The things that
yeah,
make great photographs are all there in the same.
yeah, absolutely. You can apply this, like you say, Quentin, whatever you're shooting. So it's just kind of techniques, and there's things that you learn with experience over time. Now, I've been doing this for a long time now, but I think when you start out, doing a shoot can be super stressful, and you don't take the time to just sit and kind of reflect and kind of just let things unfold. So it's a good thing if you can start, to calm yourself to a mild panic and just kind of allow things. So another thing that I'll talk about is the importance of collaborative shoots and shooting just for the sake of shooting. When we work professionally, we're most of the time going out and being paid to shoot, and we're often being paid to shoot to somebody else's brief or somebody else's expectations, which is how a client photographer relationship works. Sometimes you can, they're reliant on your creativity, but often within the parameters they set you within a brief. Go crazy, but don't go too crazy, because we still have a brief to follow.
And how crazy is your crazy? Your crazy might not be as crazy as my crazy. So yeah.
Correct. Exactly. Sometimes the client's brief is totally wrong, but that's for a whole other discussion on another day, not publicly. I learned a very valuable lesson one day with that. So I am a big fan of doing kind of collaborative or styled shoots. So a styled shoot for me as a dog photographer looks very different from a styled portrait shoot or a styled wedding shoot. But there is huge value in taking the time to do them, because you effectively have total creative free reign, and you can make great portfolio work that will lead to paying work. Promise you, because every time I've done something like this, it has. So I did a collaboration with Friendship Collar, who make collars and matching bracelets for you, collars for your dog, matching bracelet for you, and Paul's Ice Cream, who they've got a shop in Parkhurst, but they're a national South African brand now. And they brought out a brand new ice cream for dogs 2 years ago, and I saw it come out, and I know the lady from Friendship Collar is a friend of mine, and I just said, right, I've had this idea of shooting dogs with the collars and the ice cream in kind of like quite an advertising style, as I interpret it here. And, how do we feel about collaborating? So everybody was on board, and off we went. And so I came up with this concept, and we spent a day and a half shooting it in the studio, really brightly colored, and just, it was lots and lots of fun. And the great thing with a collaborative or a styled shoot is that you end up getting your work out to an audience of clients who are potential ideal clients for you, that you might otherwise not have been able to reach kind of organically, or even kind of you might not have been on their radar. So we did this shoot with these ice creams.
Oh,
I can't tell you how many ice creams we went through that got pretty much swallowed whole.
That's the look that's on the dog's face. It's almost like no one can see me because I'm not looking, but I'll just grab a little lick here. I love it.
Her mother was standing next to her, pointing the finger at her, saying, "Just don't bite it, gently." We tried with one of my dogs, Jane, who, if anyone goes to my Instagram feed or my Facebook feed, you'll see Jane pop up. She's my Ridgeback Weimaraner cross. She's very attractive, not very clever. So she's my resident supermodel. She ate 3 of them whole before we could get a shot of her doing anything. And we were like, we're going to run out of ice creams at this rate and not be able to finish. So, kind of just to give you a bit of, shooting with dogs is always lots and lots of fun. And I think the one thing with animals is it requires a lot of patience and a bit of innovation sometimes. So you can see this ice cream, someone had a good go at it before with the teeth marks in it. Some of the dogs, like I say, came in and just tried to swallow them whole. And some of them looked at the ice cream like, yeah, and hello, what? So we had to stick biltong in the back of them to actually get them to interact with it at all. So anyway, it was lots and lots of fun. So not only did this collaborative shoot end up with my images going on the Paul's Ice Cream Instagram pages, and they've got a really big following, these images also went up onto the wall of the shop in Parkhurst, and we did a bit of a launch event, and we did a bit of PR around it. And I got quite a few portrait shoot bookings from the strength of the work being up on the wall in their store. We often spend a lot of time thinking that social media and online is the be all and end all of getting our work out there, and it's not. There are other ways to get your work out in front of people in the actual real world sometimes, and it's definitely worth investigating what you can do with that.
Emma, I've got a quick question. So with these collaborative shoots, are you, is it and I suppose from a payment point of view, do you split it equally, or how does that work? Or is it a pretty much a freebie marketing side of thing from yourself?
Yeah, so this was a freebie marketing idea. It's just an idea I came up with to make some new work and kind of create a marketing opportunity. I think the one thing with collaborative shoots that I've learned over time is you've got to set some parameters down of how the images are going to be used, and making sure that people tag you and everything else when they're used and shared. Because effectively in a collaborative shoot, you have a bunch of suppliers coming together to make something happen, but you as the photographer are the one who's really doing all the legwork and providing everybody with the images that are of value. Obviously other people are giving their time as well. But it's really important, I think, to have some ground rules laid down with it, that you say in an email somewhere that everybody kind of agrees to, that wherever these images go, you tag me in them. Wherever, if they're printed or used in a magazine, I'm credited. If you put them on your website, you link back to my website. It's not difficult for people to do these things, but often I think there tends to be a little bit of upset amongst photographers, and it's purely from a lack of communication about it.
Absolutely, I agree. I think there's a whole debate about shooting for exposure, et cetera, but you've got to make sure that the exposure works for you.
Absolutely.
And also, make sure that you own the copyright of that work. So if it does go further, and an international publication wants to take them on, you need to get benefit from that. Otherwise, it's really just a pretty shoot that you took part in.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just got to be so careful with it. I could talk about copyright as well. I've learned that lesson the hard way. Again, we won't talk about that publicly, but anyone wants to know about copyright, South African copyright is horrendous. The copyright essentially in South Africa with any images lies with the person who pays for the commission of the image. So you have got to have legal things in place to protect you. If you're in the UK or the US, the copyright sits with the photographer. We've got a very skewed copyright law here. It's really not good.
Absolutely, and I think it's one of the things that I'm going to be doing, getting someone in to do a presentation on. Because I think it's really important. Because the only way that it's going to work is if everyone does it. Otherwise, we'll just use someone who's not following those guidelines.
Yep, absolutely. I think that would be a huge benefit to people, because in fact, when I fell foul of this copyright law in South Africa, I didn't know about it because I assumed that, like I'm British, like the UK or the US, I own the copyright. It's not. It's a very grey area. So if people can have stuff in place, it's really quite imperative to do so. Okay, moving on to happier things. So I don't just shoot dogs, on their own all the time. I do a lot of family photography and some newborn photography, invariably involving dogs, because I've got a bit of a tribe of clients whose dogs are intrinsic family members and they want them included in their shoots. So here's a little tiny baby with the dog here. And again, coming down to that photography style, there's a lot of demand for the babies curled up, folded up, and these beautifully arty styled pictures, which I think are they're stunning. But there is also a market for very natural photography, which is where my work sort of falls into. Natural light stuff and just kind of keeping it very sort of real. The one challenge I've found shooting at clients' homes, and I'm sure I think everybody can relate that often you'll pitch up somewhere to go and do a shoot at someone's house and you have no idea what it looks like inside. And then you get there. Oh, good. I'm being really challenged with my lighting here. So it's about kind of learning to spot where there's good light and how you can maneuver stuff around. So essentially this was shot in winter in a room that was really cold, and it was in a thatched house, which is like, I pitch up at places that are thatched and like my heart sinks, you know, because you know it's going to be dark inside. So I'd pop the baby in the bucket on the floor with a window to the left. And then we very carefully let the dog just come over and have a look at the baby, and we kind of got this shot. So I pretty much set it up, but then we kind of let the dog come in, and she luckily did exactly what we've wanted. I've recreated this shot a few times with other clients with dogs who were took zero interest in the baby, and we actually had to put dog treats under the baby to just get the dogs to come and have a look. So, and then they're all trying to turf the baby. Say again?
It's a biltong and baby shoot.
Biltong and baby shoot, exactly. So, so sort of there's a few tricks that we have to, but this one luckily just kind of happened here. I'm just going to just reiterate. I think we have an element of care when we're combining dogs and babies in a photo shoot, and dogs and children in a shoot. You know, even if it's a client's dogs and they're, you know, they know their dogs. Especially with a new baby, people will often be like, oh, you know, I'd love a picture of the baby on the dog's paws or the baby lying on the dog. You know, and I'm not I'm no dog behavior expert, but I know enough to be able to kind of read dogs a little bit and just see when they're uncomfortable. And you've just got to be very aware of that, because the worst thing that could happen would be, you know, a baby gets bitten because the dog's kind of panicked a bit and it's been put in a place it's very uncomfortable. Or you have a dog that gets up very quickly and sends a small human flying. So as photographers, when we're working with babies and animals, and even just newborns on their own, we've got a real duty of care to make sure what we're asking a client to do is safe and it's very carefully managed. Because also on a you know, talking about on a legal level, you don't want to end up being sued for something that goes wrong on a shoot because it was your idea. So
absolutely.
And make sure you've got insurance, people. It's very important.
I've got
moving on here.
A question
yes.
From Fiona again. How do you find the models for these kind of shoots? And
like the dog.
I think she's referring to the dogs.
The dog shoot. Yes. So I just put a call out on I think I'll either put a call out on social media and say I'm looking for dog models, or, you know, I've got quite a big network of people I know who've got dogs, or if I'm trying to keep it on the down low until I'm sending the images out, I'll just pop a few emails out to people and say, listen, I'm working on something here. Would you be interested in participating? And often what I'll do with collaborative shoots is I'll say to people, you can, you know, as a thank you for bringing your dogs through, I'll give you 1 or 2 prints. And then if you want to buy extras, you can, but, you know, if you don't, that's fine. And then I'll give people low-res images with my watermark on to share online, because effectively that's also excellent marketing as well. But I don't hand the digital files out to people.
Yeah, I think that's also important. You know, prints are one thing. You know, but yeah, the digital file, once you've given that out, you're never going to get a chance of additional revenue from that image.
No, that's it. So yeah, it's very important to manage those things. Very important. Okay, so we're going across the pond here to London. This is Nina in London. I like to travel. And up till quite recently, up till September last year, my daughter, who is 16 now, was living in the UK with her father. So it meant me doing a trip across to the UK 2 or 3 times a year. So I started to have a look at how can I put a plan in place to effectively fund each trip, so I'm not out of pocket from not working in South Africa and spending pounds. Because obviously I run off the plane, I'm like, woo, let's go shopping at all the places I can't get to here. So I started to look at building a client base up in London, which I'll share a little bit about, because it actually wasn't that hard to do. And kind of for the last 3 or 4 trips I've done, I've essentially paid for them with the work I've done whilst I'm there. So we talked, you know, we keep going to these sort of free shoots, which I think maybe is something I should address a little bit as well. But essentially, to sort of start building a client base in London, I reached out to a dog blogger and a couple of people who had quite big followings with dogs in London on Instagram. And I just said to them, this is me. I'm going to be in London on these dates. I'd love to do a shoot with you because I just want to get some pictures for my portfolio. I'll obviously happily supply you with the digital images as long as you tag me and credit me when they're used. So that's what I did. And it gave me some portfolio images. And actually the dog blogger I reached out to, we've become quite good friends. And every time I go over, we'll do some sort of organized dog shoot. She's got a big following. And then kind of the offshoots of that have been other people have seen the work and they've seen the work I've done with her, and they've booked me for shoots separately as well. So sometimes I think we have to do a little bit of, we have to give a little bit to then kind of get business back in return. But I think the thing with the free shoots and like the collaborative shoot is there does have to be a limit on it. You can't constantly be doing free work because you'll forever be doing free work.
And you'll always be doing it on old equipment that may be breaking down, etc., because you can't afford new.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to, even if you're doing a portfolio building exercise, that you sit and you say, I've got space to do 5 shoots. I'm going to do 5 shoots. I'm going to pick the venues I'm going to do them in. So, you know, for these free shoots, you're steering it towards the images that you absolutely want. And they're absolute portfolio images that you want to make more of. And then that's when it stops. And or even the people who you're doing the free shoots for, there has to be some parameters down with it. So I'm portfolio building. I'm going to use your images online. You need to be okay with that. In exchange for that, you're going to have a shoot and I'm going to give you X amount of prints. I'm going to give you a canvas, whatever I'm going to give you. If you want anything extra, you're welcome to buy, but there's no obligation. So I think that's where you have to have some boundaries down with these sorts of things. And it's the one thing when I'm working with mentoring clients is I see people go wrong. It's just there's a lack of boundaries with their clients, and people, you know, there's a lack of communication and people end up being sort of disappointed. So going back to the image, this is a little dog called Nina, and I discovered with my UK trips that British people don't like to get up very early. So in South Africa, we're all used to being up and awake at 6. To get good light for shoots, etc. When I tried to float the idea of maybe we meet at 8, so we can get to these places like Tower Bridge before there are tourists, I got, I think maybe like 10 would be better. So we just kind of had to roll with this. So this was shot like pretty much at midday by Tower Bridge. And there were bajillions of tourists in the background of this shot with a bunch of orange suitcases. So I got this shot lined up. I'd got my kind of positioning and how I was going to do it. And we had to move tourists. So we had a bit of an entourage with dogs. So we had these barking dogs and this complete chaos. And actually they all moved momentarily for me to get the shot here. So it looks like it's empty. It wasn't.
I thought you were going to say that you went back the next day and took it at the right time and just comped them together.
No. No. I like to keep things simple. No, that's too much like hard work. So we don't always need to have the perfect time of day or the perfect lighting for shots. I think this, it probably would have been better if it had been at sunrise or sunset, but you know what, as a picture goes, it's pretty cool, I think. So it does the job. Right. This guy is Max. He is a rescue dog that featured in my book, Mutts, that I put together, and I published that in 2017. So here we start to come back to this idea of actually making the time to make work that you want to make and that's important to you. And this was really the first project that I really allowed the time to bring it to life. So I think we've gathered I like dogs, and I do quite a lot of work for various animal shelters. And the one thing I'd noticed at a lot of these shelters is they are pretty much full of these kind of mishmashy mixed breed creatures. And I've also noticed that, if you get a purebred dog at a shelter, they go. You know, there were 2 bulldogs at Sandton SPCA, and there was a queue of people like wanting to have them. And I was sort of remember thinking to myself, where are you all for the other dogs that are in here, which will be far better? So I put together, came up with the idea of putting together a book of portraits of mixed breed adopted shelter dogs, with their adoption stories, to try to get people to start to see these dogs in a different light, to see them as actual individuals. Again, this is a theme that's coming up in my work, and to actually kind of get people to see them in a more positive light, and to encourage people to adopt. So if anybody's thinking about doing a photography book, speak to me. It's not all it's cracked up to be at all. I was rejected by every single publisher I pitched this to. And I ended up crowdfunding to make the money to put Mutts together. So I managed to drum up 166,000 Rand in 45 days to put this book project together. So again, anyone wants to crowdfund, you know, hit me up. I can help you with that. So, and the idea for Mutts came to me when I was lying on a yoga mat at the end of a yoga class. And I think this sort of brings in, we're sitting at the moment with all of this time on our hands, and creativity loves a bit of a vacuum, and it loves some space to be able to pop into your mind with, hey, I've got this idea, how about you run with this? And I think it's something that's really important, because the creative work we do just for the sake of doing it, because it's important and because it has meaning for us, it attracts clients. And it's something that is a wonderful complement to your own kind of money making business, if you like. So, but it took a lot of my time up. So, so yes, and this was obviously shot in studio on a white background. 2 lights at the back, set up slightly brighter than the light at the front, so we kind of get the back overexposes, so you get this seamless white background. That's high key lighting in a very small nutshell. And then we move on to the Black series, which is something I'm probably best well known for in recent times. And this has very much become a signature style for me. The black dogs on the black backdrop. And this was something I'd been experimenting with since the middle of 2018 in my studio with paying clients. And then I came up with the idea of, okay, how about we have this problem of black dog syndrome, which is essentially black dogs are the least desirable of all shelter dogs. So I thought, you know, this works really well as a setup, and I could use it as a means of educating people about black dog syndrome and encouraging people to perhaps adopt and look at black shelter dogs in a slightly different light. So this shot was taken with natural light. I'm going to show you another one that was shot in the studio. So one of my very good friends very gleefully told me, I've adopted 2 black dogs. I said, oh good, I'm glad my series influenced you. This was Christmas just gone. So I did some photos of them at her house. This guy's quite old, and literally I have a reflector. We're shooting on their porch, so it's slightly covered, so we've got a bit of even lighting, and then a couple of small children holding up the black backdrop behind and moving it, because the dogs kept moving, so I had these kids moving with the blankets. So you don't have to have a complicated setup to get good shots.
I don't know, 2 small kids holding a blanket seems very complicated to me.
We had nothing to hang it on. It's fine, we bribed them. My friend's children are great. I could always bribe them to help me by giving them $50 to do something. So yeah, so this is the one that's on natural light, and this was one that was shot in studio. So the lights, it's a little bit harder. And literally my studio setup for this is a soft box just slightly to one side and a reflector on the other side. And it's just, you know, it catches all the folds and the hair and all the loveliness of Nancy the pug here. So my aim with this series was, again, this is where this theme of my work starts to come in, for people to connect with these dogs as individuals. Most of the images in the Black series are eyes to camera, so they invite you to make eye contact with the dogs, and to to sort of see them as this is Nancy, the black dog, not just, you know, here's another black dog from a shelter. So the Black series went viral last year. So I posted 20 or so of these images onto Board Panda, and I tried out my writing skills, and I combined these with captions describing the dog as if they were a human putting their description onto Tinder. So the combination of the images and the wording was very popular. So it literally went internationally viral. This series has won several international awards, and my TEDx talk that I did was about black dogs. So I managed to kind of eke my way onto a TEDx stage to talk about dogs. So this really, you know, this for me was a very powerful lesson in really not underestimating the power of your creativity and of creating work that's important to you. It's so important. Here is the said child and one of my dogs here. This one was shot on a beach at Canton-on-Sea a couple of years ago, and I'd spotted the potential for this picture the day before when we were walking on the beach, and we had this quite elevated sand dune. So I knew, I think we're noticing here negative space in my images as a bit of a theme going on as well. Yeah, so literally we just got the sun setting behind, so I exposed for the sun. So these two would be silhouetted, and I made them run up and down the sand dune until I got the shot that I wanted. And it was very, yes, like I say, very easy. Just a bit of sunset here. So I thought it was quite a fun picture. Somebody who looked at it said it looks like a bit of a Tim Burton type thing, and it just a lovely sense of fun in this image here.
Absolutely, it's beautiful. Emma, what I've done is I've put the link on your website to the Black Rescue series in the comments, awesome, so people can go and follow that.
Fabulous, thank you. And here's another one from London. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit now. And this I kind of had this, the idea for this shot in my head. So Joy, the dog here, actually walks very nicely on a lead, but I quite like this idea of them in very fancy Chelsea, looking like she was being walked by her dog. And it just so happened that her dress and everything else matched up with flowers. So it wasn't quite planned. But yeah, it was a really fun shoot. And look at all these London pictures where it was sunny.
Yeah, that's not London.
No. Here's one I shot for Land Rover South Africa. Not name dropping here for any other reason other than to tell you that the reason I got commissioned for this job was that somebody working at Land Rover happened to follow me on Instagram and liked my work and said to the PR people who were organizing the shoot for the Barber and Land Rover accessories, I need this woman to shoot the stuff, see if you can get her to do it. So if anybody needed a bit of a reminder to consistently make work and consistently share work and just keep on keeping on with it, because you never really know who's looking, if that's not a reminder, I don't know what will be for you. So it's really, you can't underestimate the importance of continuing to make and share work. It's so important. This is Max. So he was my foster puppy until last week. I managed to get him out of the house in a record 10 days and adopted. And I am currently sitting with a Nikon Z6 that I've got on loan from them, which is only supposed to be on loan for a week. But here we are in lockdown. So I'm having lots of fun. So I normally shoot with a Nikon D850. So the mirrorless was an interesting experience. And I didn't think I'd like it to start with because I'm a bit old school. And actually it is the most phenomenal piece of kit. So I shot this with my 85mm lens at an aperture of f1.8. Obviously, I've focused on Max's eyes here. I haven't done any sharpening on this picture. This is how sharp it came out of the camera. I mean, it's a phenomenal, and that lens is phenomenal as well. Phenomenal camera. And part of the reason I was shooting at f1.8 is because my garden is like a total disaster. So if you go onto my Instagram, I've got a highlights feed with the behind the scenes of this, and I've actually shot a little bit of footage of the garden. So you can see what I was hiding with this very shallow depth of field.
Sometimes it takes a shallow depth of field to rescue the location. Huh?
Absolutely. So yeah, and I think the one thing with working at an aperture of f1.8 is you've got to be so precise with where your focal point is, because if you get it wrong, you've kind of lost the whole thing. So and I'm very much a fan of trying to get things right in camera rather than correcting in post-production. I don't enjoy spending lots of time behind the computer. Okay, so here is Murdoch the calf, and this is creative side project number 3 for me. This is part of the farm series, and I happened to stumble across a farm sanctuary. It's called Ashes. It's in Pretoria, sort of October time last year, and I'd figured that I've got dog portraits down, so let me try some farm animals and see how that works out for me. And I was also kind of toying with the idea of going vegan at the time as well. So it was kind of interesting to go and actually meet some of these creatures. So Murdoch and his sister were rescued at 2 weeks old from a horrible veal farming situation. And actually, after meeting them, I kind of made the decision to go vegan there and then with that. So, but obviously that's not what we're talking about today. So my aim with the farm series is very much like the Black series, is to invite people to connect with these animals as individuals. You know, we eat farm animals, and we very much kind of, they're as individual as our dogs and cats, but we don't see them like that. So the whole purpose of this series is to very gently perhaps challenge people to look differently about these creatures in a non-confrontational way. I'm not interested in trying to preach to people because it doesn't work. But it's just kind of doing something to just try and change perspectives a little bit here.
It's really unfair because that is such a beautiful portrait.
Yeah, sweet, hey?
Terribly unfair.
I know. We can have another discussion another day about being vegan. This is not the place. But and this is Willow the pig. This pig's farm animals really are a whole different kettle of fish. So I'm obviously shooting with natural light, because trying to attempt any sort of artificial lighting is just, it's going to get smashed into the ground. And I just got quite lucky with this shot where she looked up. And I'd hung my black backdrop up in the stable, and I've got the very low lighting, a little bit challenging. They're moving an awful lot. We've got someone trying to bribe them with carrots. And I just happened to get this shot where she looked up, and I just got these eyes nice and sharp and in focus. And as you can see, Willow prepped beautifully for this shoot by rolling in mud beforehand.
Fantastic.
So this is a kind of latest series I'm working on, which is I've got to go back and shoot some more of some of the bigger animals. It is very challenging to try and get to work with big animals like this, because they just don't follow instructions like dogs or cats. And I think it doesn't help when I've got this very specific look of, I want the animal in front of me, I want them eyes to camera, and it's challenging, but it's good. We all need a creative challenge. So yeah, but again, very simple, just natural light, no reflector, nothing, just natural light coming in from behind me with this shot. So I was in Los Angeles recently. I managed to get back into the country on the 16th of March, just before they closed the borders. And then I had to sit at home and quarantine in case it was contagious after 26 hours of traveling. And I had gone to Los Angeles for a business coaching event. And this is somebody I know. And we've been trying to do a shoot together for years. So we'd set the shoot up actually it was on the Saturday I was leaving. And it was pouring with rain. And we tried to do a bit of shooting in a hotel, and as soon as you pull a DSLR out, they all come running and they're like, no, you need a photo permit. So we couldn't really shoot indoors, we couldn't reschedule. So we had to really make the most of what we were sitting with, which was a freezing cold, horrible, rainy day. So we actually just ran with it. And I think just what I wanted to say with this really is that sometimes our shoots don't happen the way we want them to. And I was really disappointed, because I'd put together this whole mood board of where I wanted to shoot, and sunshine, and the Walt Disney Hall, which is beautiful and mirrored, and palm trees, and this is what I had to work with. And at the end of the day, you can be kind of, things don't work out exactly as you wanted. She was thrilled with these pictures. So if your client's happy, even if perhaps you think, oh, I could have done this better, or could have done this differently, or I wish it hadn't rained, sometimes that's all that matters. So,
but at the end of the day, you've also got a huge story that that goes on behind the image, you know. And I think a lot of times we forget that, you know, if something does go wrong and you manage to still get the picture, it could even be even better because of the story.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes our stories put our images into context, and I think you know, we could talk whatever about that, but sometimes that's what you need to make a good image great. It's just when people get the story and they relate to it a little bit more. Here is Ophelia, the little piglet who came through to my studio. Even though I'm sort of starting with my black series of images, you know, I'm kind of almost starting to think, well, I've been starting to think, what's the next thing that I do that is completely different? But this has been to date one of my most liked pictures on Instagram. So the stats don't lie, and I think people love this style of photography. So every time I share it, it's, you know, even if it's an image that's quite similar to another one, it's really popular. So I guess I'll kind of stick with it for now. But again, very simple setup here. Pigs will sit like dogs, so she did sit on command here. She was quite small, so it's a little bit easier to maneuver than the big pigs at the farm sanctuary. So, and I think the one thing just to talk about here with a black background setup is that I have done a little bit of retouching with this because the background was a bit patchy. But in general, to get a clean black background, you want your subject as far away from the background as you possibly can, and you want as small a light source as you possibly can have that's as close to your subject as you can possibly get it. So you just reduce the amount of overspill you get that would light up your black backdrop, which is, you know, in my case, it's not what I want here. So hopefully that just helps you a little bit with a bit of setup there. And then last but not least, here's Rudy. I think we can all guess where this picture was taken. And photographing animals means spending a lot of time lying on the floor. So you will generally get better pictures of pets, and the same goes for children as well when you shoot on the same level as them and you shoot at eye level or a little bit lower. So that's my last tip that I'm going to share with people. Especially when you're lying on the floor in London, people look at you like, you okay there? Your hair's touching the floor, you okay there? Probably not as bad as lying on the floor in the middle of Joburg. So that's kind of the last tip I'm going to share with you. And sometimes you'll have people who want to be in their pictures with their pets, but they don't want to feature so much. So for me, this was a really great way of putting his mum in the shot, but still making it all about Rudy. So there we go.
Fantastic.
So this is me. If you want to get in touch with me, this is how you can get in touch with me and how you can find me. And I hope everybody enjoyed the presentation today, and we've got a few minutes for questions if anyone's got any.
Yeah, I think that was very cool. You know, you almost expect a couple of shots to really like resonate with you, and then you have one like the little piglet that you know, all of a sudden that's there, and you kind of going, hold on, that's amazing, and the calf, etc. So I think there's the expected pictures, but then you sort of get caught up by the unexpected ones, which I think is really cool.
Cool.
I'm just going to quickly go through here and see. There was one question early on which I think we kind of answered, but so when you are be it in the studio or at a client's house, how do you get the dogs to sort of sit and behave for you? I mean, I know you mentioned the biltong and under the baby, etc., and the biltong with the ice cream, but what sort of techniques would you normally use there?
Literally whatever. You've kind of got to communicate with your dog owners and find out what makes their dogs tick. So whether it's a toy or a snack or something that gets them to sit in the right place. I also advise people whether I'm shooting at their home or whether they're coming to the studio, to make sure the dogs have been out for a bit of a walk or a run or something before. So you're not dealing with like a ridiculously high level of energy, especially if somebody new comes around. You know what dogs are like. They're like, whoa, someone new is here, amazing. And then you're like, actually, we just want you to sit quietly so we can drape a baby over you. Could you cooperate, you know?
Yeah, you also want to tell them, let it run around outside, but in a clean environment, because
absolutely,
if you know how to wash the thing.
Yeah, how many times I've had dogs in the middle of a shoot go and take a dip in the pool.
I can believe it. I'm just having a look here to see if what's your favorite lens to shoot animals with?
Okay, great question. I shoot primarily with a 24-70 lens. In the studio and in people's houses, because that's just such an easy and adaptable lens to use. I've also got my 85mm lens, which is great, but obviously you need it. I find a fixed lens a little bit restrictive for a portrait shoot, so I might shoot with one lens on one camera and another lens on another. I did also treat myself to an 8-15mm fisheye lens, which I will occasionally pull out as well, just for fun, but that's not a lens you can kind of use too often because the technique gets a bit old. So
yeah, I think the 24-70 is great if the farm animal / puppy etc. is a bit skittish, because you can quickly recompose.
Exactly.
If you want to do a portrait and the dog's going to sit nice and quietly for you, then an 85 is a fantastic lens. So I think that works really well. I'm just having another look here. So for those backgrounds, just something from my side. So for those backgrounds, are you using paper, or is it like a black velvety type material?
So have got a black paper roll in the studio. So like for the picture of the little piglet, I can move everything far enough away that I don't get, because even that black paper roll does give you a bit of reflection.
Reflect, yeah.
It's a bit frustrating. And then for the portable stuff, I've got a black blanket that's like it's quite a thick velour, which is quite good. It's really easy to retouch because it doesn't obviously reflect the light quite the same, and it's very portable. You just have to find somewhere to throw it and hope
two small children, and hope that your goats don't try to eat it. So yeah, absolutely. I've got I'm not sure what it is, but it's like a fake felt, which I use as a background. But I do find that it just attracts any form of lint or fluff or whatever.
Yes, hairs,
and that drives me insane, because I know that I'm going to have to retouch that later on, even footprints,
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's the problem with it. It's little bits of hairs, especially for me. Dog hair is unfortunately a hazard of the job.
That's why you started shooting black dogs, because you can't see them on the background.
On my blanket, absolutely.
Yeah, very clever. All right, so I don't think there's anything else here that's come up, and we're kind of about a minute or so before we get cut off. So just a very big thank you from me, and I think from a lot of people. There's a lot of comments here. Everyone's loving the little portraits, etc. So I think it was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And if you can have a look at the comments and maybe answer some questions, and we'll take it from there.
I will. Awesome. I'll hop in later. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.